1. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land that was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as he got to look out over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next-door neighbor's backyard extended a good 8 feet past his, giving neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his new neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like. And one day he noticed the next-door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the old fence posts that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in, then started to clear the land, intending to gain himself more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Services as a young lad, so he thought he had better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions. So he heads out back for a little chat. Neighbor is immediately defensive, and before Gramps says much, neighbor tells him,
"You're new here? I've been here for 10 years. And to mind your own damn business."
Gramps decides not to press the issue. Nothing happens that year, but the following year, when most of the park emptied out to head north for the summer, the county comes by to check on the preserve. Gramps notices him going back and forth behind his neighbor's house. The workers are pulling out maps and taking photos and making phone calls, and soon more guys show up. Turns out neighbor had moved the post several times over the years, and in reality his backyard is supposed to be even smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make it worse, neighbor put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf cart and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer, so the county will have to move them before they can do anything else. They tape a notice to the front door and leave. Gramps goes over to read it, and it states that neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto protected lands. He has 30 days to move his car, tear up the pavers, and pay a fine of $11,000 because of damage to endangered species who inhabit the protected lands, as well as trespassing fees. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in golf cart and car being towed and impounded. Pavers will be dug up and carted off at neighbor's expense, and the fine will increase for every additional day past the deadline. 30 days comes and goes. So a week after that, Gramps has quite the show as first the car and cart were towed, pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence posts and ropes were replaced with metal posts embedded into buried cement bases, connected by steel cables. Whole process took several weeks to finish, but the preserve looked a lot more legit when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could monitor the wildlife and encroachers remotely. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of neighbor's house. By November, the snowbirds were flooding back into the park, including neighbor. That was Gramps' second show of the summer as neighbor reads all the notices, digging down until he reads the first one, then runs out back and starts screaming and cussing up a storm before running back to his car to dig out his cell phone so he can call the county to find out where his car and golf cart were. Gramps stays indoors to avoid the guy as he is frantically trying to unload his car, turn on his water and electricity, get the AC and toilets going, all the while trying to get someone at county to pick up the phone and give him some answers. He finally gets a live person and proceeds to scream at them while on the speakerphone about his car and cart, so the call keeps getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically, neighbor is told to come to the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later, neighbor catches Gramps outside and asks if he was there when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps said he was, and the neighbor says,
"Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You have my number up north."
Gramps said he had thought about doing that, but figured neighbor would prefer him to mind his own damn business, so he decided against it. 2. This story is from a few years ago when I worked in the legal department of a 1,000-plus store national retailer. As part of my job, I handled customer complaints that elevated when the customer threatened legal action. Our customer service call center forwarded Karen's call to me after she threatened legal action. Karen left a message claiming that she was not provided $10 in customer reward coupons, Spend $200, receive a $10 coupon in the mail sort of thing. This was before apps. Based on her purchase of clothing for her son and daughter for back to school. I looked into it and called Karen back. It turned out we had an old address associated with her rewards account. No big deal, right? I spoke with Karen and offered to send her the original $10 coupon and an additional $25 for her trouble to the correct address. That did not satisfy Karen. She claimed we should have known her address and threatened to sue us if we didn't pay her $1,000 in cash. Her rationale was that it would cost us at least $1,000 to defend the suit. She was in a state in which our company did not have any offices, so we should just pay it to her. I declined, but still forwarded her the $10 coupon she was entitled to pursuant to our rewards program. Sure enough, she sued us for breach of contract, fraud, and any other conceivable charge. I went to my boss, the COO, and told him the story. He asked what I wanted to do. I said I'd rather pay legal fees to a defense attorney than pay Karen, and he agreed. I contacted outside counsel, our awesome attorney, explained the situation to him, and I shit you not, he said, "I get to sue Karen? I should be paying you guys. There are a lot of lawyers in this legal company who would love to sue her ass, as she is reckless, unpleasant, and a total pain in the ass to deal with. I'll gladly take your case." He agreed to defend us at a reduced rate. Part of our defense strategy was to counter-sue her under the state's frivolous lawsuit statute, which would move the suit from small claims court to the larger civil court. Awesome Attorney filed our answer and counterclaim. Although Karen was an attorney, she was not a defense attorney, so she had to engage her own attorney to defend against the counterclaim. After a couple of hearings, she offered to settle for no more money exchanged. She didn't even get the extra $25 coupon I offered her, and the dismissal of both suits. I talked with Awesome Attorney about continuing our claim, but he advised it would probably be worth settling and being done with it rather than being vindictive. Although vindictive would have been fun. Courts tend not to like that, so I agreed. My company ended up paying Awesome Attorney $900 in attorney's fees. Awesome Attorney later called and told us that the attorney Karen engaged charged her $1,700 to defend the suit. Although I would have liked to continue with our suit, I think her having to pay $1,700 over a $10 coupon sent to the wrong address is sufficient justice. 3. This happened when my son, husband, and myself were still living with his parents. His father was the penultimate EP. My son and I were in the living room watching Animal Planet, some show about newborn kittens, just minding our own business when my father-in-law, who has no manners, no tact, and has zero boundaries, came in, took the remote from me, and in a loud, heavily accented English, he's Chinese, I'm not, informs me, "He needs to watch cartoons much better for grandson." He then proceeds to channel surf to find a cartoon. This really pissed me off and drives me nuts, because he does this to not just me but everybody in the household. He will routinely come into the living room night or day, morning or evening, take the remote from whomever is there, sometimes right out of your hand, and change the channel. Doesn't matter if you were there first or in the middle of a show, he just does exactly as he pleases, without a thought or consequence. Me and my husband have had more than one fight with him about his behavior, and that's not something we want our son to learn. But luck, or more accurately karma, was on my side that night, because my father-in-law, one of the most hypocritically prudish people I know, well, he managed to find an adult cartoon, The Haunted World of El Superbeasto, FYI, for my son to watch. I'd seen this movie before, so I knew exactly what was coming. The smile on my face could have rivaled the Cheshire Cat. So being the petty, vindictive bitch I am, and completely at my bull saturation point, I decided to teach him a little lesson, and get in a little PettyRevenge at the same time. So while he wasn't looking, I stealthily snatched up the remote and hid it, then sat back and watched the show. Even better, my father-in-law managed to put it on just before the Velvet Von Black striptease scene. Anyone who's seen the movie knows that scene. As the movie progressed, my father-in-law got the greatest look of dawning horror I've ever seen, then frantically started searching for the remote. his face tomato red with mortification and panic. I actually fell off the couch, clutching my stomach, laughing my butt off. I was laughing so hard I cried. My kid, who was 8 at the time and had secretly watched the movie behind my back on Netflix, was on the floor with me laughing. When my husband came home a few minutes later, my father-in-law angrily told him what happened, didn't even deny snatching the remote. Somehow, don't quite know how, it was all my fault he'd put that cartoon on. This last comment resulted in Hubby laughing on the floor with us. Even my mother-in-law, who rarely laughs, found this hysterical. This happened 4 years ago, and we still laugh about it. 4. It's SoonerSenior with another story. In it I was working for the same pizza parlor as before, but at a different location. This will be kind of short. When I first went to work there, I worked with the younger brother of a girl I went to junior high with. He was the opening manager 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. I worked 11 a.m. to 3 p.m., then came back at 5 p.m. and worked till 10 p.m. Yeah, 9 hours, but that gave me an hour's supper break. One afternoon, right after the last lunch customer left, Tommy told me to slice a bunch of veggies for the salad bar. I started into the back room and happened to turn around to look. He'd taken a pitcher and chilled glass out of the cooler, filled the pitcher full of beer, then went out to one of the booths. He opened up the service door of the jukebox, put a dozen credits on it, then, while I cleaned up the back room, collecting trash, washing dishes, and chopping vegetables, he sat at the booth, drank the pitcher of beer, and smoked cigarettes. This was the late 1970s, so there was no law against it, and listened to music. This went on for 5 days of the week. I got tired of it, since I knew that him drinking beer and listening to music on the jukebox were against the rules, so I called the corporate office and reported him. Tommy was fired, and I received a $100 reward from the company. 5. I worked for this small business IT consulting firm for 7 years. Owned and operated by a person we will call Dick. First 2 years, things were fine. Occasionally, this guy would take things a little too far. He was just passionate about his opinion and always had to be right. So I'd always give him that. I don't have to agree, but I saw his need and left it at that. What I started to discover, however, is the turnover for the company is a couple of years, and I began to realize why. The boss, Dick, picks one worker and makes it his life's work to make that person as miserable as possible. I'm guessing the reason... ego purposes? For months I'd hear him shouting all the time at this one guy. The co-worker, after leaving the meeting, would go back to his office from where I had a view, and I could just see the stress and misery in his face, till I finally said to him, "What the hell, man? He's always giving you a hard time here lately. What did you do?" He didn't seem to know. He confided in me right there the level of hell he's in, and some of the things Dick has said or done. I couldn't believe some of the details he shared and what Dick both said and did. I felt things were embellished because people just don't do some of the things he said. I would realize much later he was telling the truth, as crazy as it sounded. A few months later, he finally found another job and left. I talked to him a couple of times a year, and he always said it was the best choice in his life he ever made. Dick's sights then narrowed on me. I couldn't take a lot, so for the next 5 years I took it. He would insult me pretty much every day, each day more and more colorful. I didn't really care or take it home with me, so it wasn't a problem for me. For Dick, I would learn it was. Unrelated, 5 years in, I put in my notice because he asked me to get a couple of certifications, and if I did, he would take care of me. Once I did what was requested, he backed out of the agreement and played coy. Once he received my notice a couple months later, he called me up within a minute, begged me to stay. It's important to note, he only asked for 2 certifications. I not only obtained those, but an additional 14 on top of that. Each time he would tell me,
"Good job, you will be well taken care of."
He lied 16 times in total on this matter. He matched the offer and increased my salary up another $15,000. Not looking forward to starting a new job, I decided to stay. What I learned is I was a fool to do that, and money isn't everything. Go where you'll be the most happy. Best life advice I can give after this experience. He left me alone for a couple months after that. He wasn't in the office much either. Then a day struck his fancy to start things up again, only he ran out of material. My work is solid, and he had no opportunity to criticize that. The only method he had was bashing his ego and sarcasm around, but he realized it had no impact on me. Here is a brief snippet of any given day of what it's like to be selected as his target. He would communicate a problem he was having in length. Let's say he complained about his cell phone. After he finished his story, you would provide a helpful suggestion or advice from your experience. In turn, he would ask with an entitled and sarcastic tone if you were an expert on the matter and wanted to see those credentials. I learned fast. Never speak unless spoken to. Any comment or insult he made, I would respond without emotion and just say, okay. Because Dick wasn't able to get a rise out of me the old-fashioned way, he decided to create fictional content for a new direction. Our small company would go out to eat as a whole, or just order in on Fridays. I ate half my sandwich and wrapped the remaining to take home. He saw me with leftover food and claimed that I was taking home dinner on his dime. Any time there was any leftover, even a single French fry, he'd be there with a magnifying glass for inspection to find any conceivable way to yell. So on Fridays I started packing my lunch. I'd order a beverage and a side. I'd finish the beverage and side, then eat what I brought. If I didn't finish it, he had no opportunity. You could see the look of disappointment when he would scan my plate. This went on a couple weeks. He had no opportunity and couldn't complain. He realized he failed again. So then he came up with the next item. The bathroom. This I actually did a little research on and couldn't find anything legally I could do. But anytime anyone would use the restroom, he would blame me for the smell. Instead of hello when passing in the hallway, he would say, "Did you use spray or did you light a match?" As hateful as he could. But that was his normal. It went much deeper than this, more than I care to share. But I honestly believe Dick has a fetish on this topic, which is why I looked into it legally. It was just always on his mind, and a little too important to him. Let's just leave the rest unsaid. I must have visually tipped him off I didn't approve of this because he never got bored with it. However, I did at least get him to stop asking if I use spray. Anytime I used bathroom, even to take a piss, I'd use the entire can of air freshener. That wasn't an easy task, as I'd have to mask my face to empty that entire thing. Takes a while, surprisingly, to empty an entire can in a session. One thing is for certain, when I was finished, someone used the spray, and Dick was buying a new can. Took about 5 weeks, but I think he figured it out spending so much on spray. He stuck to just asking about matches after that. He even provided them in the bathroom. One day we were out with a client. The current topic at this moment was, what is your favorite meal? My answer was hot wings. I could eat those every day. Dick jumps in, his comment, "Just think how bad that bathroom would smell." Most at the table wouldn't get the context and direction of that comment, but I knew. He did this in front of a client, in public, while people are eating. I almost walked out. Then I remembered he drove, and it's a long way back. Plus Dick is over 60. What kind of person knocks out a senior? I had to chant that in my mind to keep control. I never get pissed, but after years this was the last straw. I seriously pleaded with myself all day not to do it because I'd go to jail and he would win. During this time period, he also started playing with my money. Behind 4 or 5 months with reimbursement, week late on paychecks, stuff like that. You ask where it's out, he says, next week. You explain that he already said that last week, then he'd play coy. I finished out the day without reacting somehow. Took everything I had, but I'm not going to allow this to be unanswered. That was dangerous and too close. If he wants trouble, I'll give it to him. I will get even in a lawful way. Somehow. Then the idea came to me that night, did my research, and odds were in my favor that it could work. I'm just going to mirror him until he fires me. When he fires me, he will have to pay me half my current salary of $65,000 until I get a new job. You know what? I can live perfectly fine on $32.5K. Why not make him pay out of his pocket $32.5K for everything is said and done? He would have to pay this over the course of 6 months or until I found a new job. So my goal was to make him pay me $32,500, to be exact, over 6 months as restitution for what he said at that table. I read up on all the rules in my state for unemployment. Each state is different. But basically, to qualify for it, it can't be your fault if you were fired. So if I stood there and told him where to put it, that's a no-go. However, if I was laid off, I would qualify. So I hit him where it hurt first. His favorite thing in the world is meetings, because he loves to hear himself talk and take you step by step through his thought process, with a noble tone congratulating himself for his thinking, and why his way is the best way. So I started speaking up and illustrated a more efficient way that costs less. He would argue, sometimes red in the face mad, especially if others in the meeting liked my idea. He knew he was wrong, but he would dismiss them and demand it be done his way. I then started talking about him within earshot on purpose. I'd say things like, "Make sure you do that Dick's way, takes longer, but it's better than him releasing the Kraken." It would make everyone laugh. But it wasn't a direct insult. Trust me when I say this guy has a massive ego, and I was counting on this for pissing him off. I laid it on thick. In time it took its toll. I knew it did because of what came next. His retaliation was the kitchen sink. He had nothing, so he started accusing me of things, then playing coy when it came to reviewing the details or facts. He would put words in my mouth. I stated he was wrong, and then he would tell me I was. All he was doing was opening the door so he could play a revengeful sarcasm game. I know it's a game, so I decided to take his new toy away from him by just going along with whatever it is he said, which further made him mad because what he was doing had no effect on me. Fast forward 6 months, and yes, I'm still working here. But we were only receiving a couple calls a day, which are 15 minutes each. This was due to Dick's bad business decisions. While I took delight knowing he was hemorrhaging money for months, I was hoping for a layoff to execute my plan. Nothing. I have to make him want to fire me, it's the only way. I have to beat him at his own game while providing the illusion he is in control. So I turned up the heat. I was asked to travel to a client by the second in command. I said, "I'm sorry, man. I haven't received reimbursement in 6 months for travel expenses. And I just had my work cell phone service turned off. With the way business is right now, things aren't looking good. I'd be stupid to take on more expenses, and I'm owed over $2,000 as it is. Once that's paid in full, I'd be more than happy to continue on a week-to-week basis after reimbursements." That day, Dick had a meeting with me and set up a payment plan to pay the money back. After 3 weeks, it would be paid. So I said to Dick, "Understood. After 3 weeks, I'll be on the road again. Cool." Just making sure he understood because he wanted to play games and not pay the amount in full, Dick is now going to pay me my salary for 3 weeks to do nothing until the reimbursement fee is paid. Guy has a several $million house, goes on vacations, has boats, etc. Out of all the things I've done so far, this has made the most significant impact. Because I outwit him at his own game. It embarrassed him in front of the eyes of others. Why? Because the second in command was instructed to drive me anywhere I was needed. So I had my own personal taxi driver for the few calls we had over the next 2 weeks. 2 weeks he paid 2 people, me and the admin, to drive and watch me work. I was friends with the admin and he knew exactly what I was doing and he loved every second of it. Then on the 3rd week, 3 days until the final payment, it happens. Dick enters my office and gives me the familiar demeaning dog wave gesture to follow him without speaking. We sit down and he asks me what the problem is. I told him the problem is he needs a new hobby. In one hand, you have someone sitting here that busted his ass for the last 7 years. In the other, you need to bash someone's face in the dirt with your ego. The problem with me is I won't conform and provide both. He asked for some examples. I said you know what I'm talking about, and even if I did review them you'd play coy. He then played coy about being coy. I laughed. After a pause he said, "If you feel that way, why didn't you speak to me about it?"
"If you feel that way, why didn't you speak to me about it?"
I reminded him that I did twice and both times he humiliated me for it, and said,
"This is IT."
What the IT career that I've done the last 20 years has to do with his ego, I'll never know. He responded with, "I'm behind the times, my work has been poor, and out of the kindness of his heart, he gave me a raise after I demanded it." I responded with, "Okay." Then he finally said what I wanted to hear.
"I want to call it quits."
I remained professional and communicated I'm sorry things didn't work out, and spent the next 2 hours reviewing stuff with co-workers and how to handle certain things, I shook his hand with a smile and left without saying anything negative. The fruit of my labor will do the talking for me shortly. En route on the way home, I called family members to tell them the good news. Everyone was so happy for me. It finally happened. When I arrived home, I promptly adjusted the dates of the unemployment forms I had filled out already, in weight, and submitted them. I called the state and confirmed everything was documented on my end accurately, and now it's the waiting game. My plan wasn't realized until my boss received the letter in the mail about a week later, stating he's going to have to shell out my salary for the next 6 months until I found a job. Panicked at this point, he realized what I set him up for, so he claimed he fired me for poor work performance. The state said, "Okay, prove it." In this state, it's the employer's burden to prove it. My record had no blemishes, and he couldn't use a client because a number of people at any given client would vouch for me, and the truth is, they all liked me and appreciated my work. Realizing the shitstorm he's in now, I'm told from the admin friend he was on the phone with him quite a while, twisting and turning the fake stories out. Bottom line, the state needed to see documented verbal and written warnings, signed so he couldn't fake them. He called his lawyer, and his lawyer told him he's screwed. Later, my boss told coworkers he felt bad for me that I couldn't find work, and he decided to give unemployment to me to save face of his ego. That made official that his ego was affected. He didn't want anyone to know the truth. At this point, he realized I got the better of him when I fought back, and I won. Big. In a last-ditch effort, he lied about how much I made. The state sent me paperwork stating this fact and asked me to prove my salary, so I gave them copies of checks and pay stubs for the last 6 months. After that, things went easy. He was flagged for lying, which made the remaining steps effortless, the state rep told me. For the reason I was terminated, I said, Dick the owner made some poor business decisions that impacted the company, losing business and clients. He let me go as a business decision. In his shoes, I'd have done the same thing and understand. I wrote it that way for a reason, but Dick didn't realize why. I knew what his reaction would be. The state saw a down-to-earth guy that was honest and understanding on paper, but they saw Dick's predicted response of being a dick, most likely yelling and, of course, lying. I had no doubt that he would seal the deal simply on the evaluation of character before the facts even entered into it, his reaction being his ego had to take it up the ass. Once for failing as a businessman, another for me saying so on the state paperwork, and lastly, accepting that I got the better of him, and all this time I've been coaxing him to make this move. The only thing left to do is pay me every single week, and his money goes to the state first, then the state sends it to me, so he can't play games with my money or the state is coming after him. Over the next 6 months, I took that time to enjoy myself, pursue hobbies, and lived life to the fullest on his dime as a reward for his comment. Once the letter came to renew unemployment, Dick would no longer have to pay, or only a percentage, I forget. The important thing to know is taxpayers would have to pay after 6 months, not Dick. So I declined the renewal. 3 weeks later I had a new job. It was either that or knock him out during that lunch. It wasn't easy, it took work, but I'm proud of the way I handled it. I feel vindicated. It's pretty rare the world is balanced, even often wins. But not this time. This time it cost Dick $32,500 to be exact. All in all, I can say 10 out of 10 would do it again. Due to his age, I can't imagine that it would be a humbling experience at this point, but it was for me. Money isn't everything. There is only one thing of true value, your happiness. A year later, I'm very happy now. I enjoy my new job and my new boss. I discovered myself again, who I really am. The goofy, friendly guy. My light is no longer dimmed by a dark presence, and I can be myself without punishment. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, number 33. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. We have the rain keeping us company tonight, much more preferable to all the other usual sounds that annoy me while I'm trying to work. But I am recording much later, it's 1:45 in the morning. Usually more quiet when I do that. Generally a better time for me to record, but I've been getting up a bit earlier recently. I've been waiting on things arriving, and they're all coming via Royal Mail, so I want to make sure I don't have to go pick them up. Just one more thing. One last book for my Anno Dracula collection. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.